Okay. It being 7 o'clock on 6/1/2017, call the Town of Mashpee Board of Health to order. First order of business is expense warrants.
Yep, 3. Is this just our landfill?
I'm sorry?
This is our landfill contract?
Yes, that's the last part of it, yeah.
So just so we have an accurate rendition of our agenda this evening, is it accurate that the 7:20 and the 7:25 are not showing?
That's correct.
Okay, and then there was another one under new business that is, was there someone else that was going to not?
Yes, number 5 in new business is going to be continued.
Okay. So is 7:20 and 7:25 expecting to come to the next June meeting?
That's correct.
Okay, so continued. So 7:25 has been going on since October 16th-ish, 2016.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting a little long in the tooth.
Yeah. We should be able to finish it up next meeting.
Okay. Okay, moving on to new business number 2, the public session minutes from 4/27/17. Do you have any comments,
Nope.
corrections?
No comments, no. Move to approve the public health session minutes for April 27th, 2017.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, number 3, the request for the 2017 seasonal food service at the country store.
Mr. Gelly has purchased the Raw Bar, the Country Store, and Bob's Seafood Cafe. The board previously approved the Raw Bar as it opened earlier than the other establishments. Bob's Seafood Cafe has been inspected, and all the required information has been provided. The Country Store was not ready for final inspection, but will be soon. I'm expecting this week. So at this point, I think that Bob's Seafood Cafe is all set for a food establishment permit, and the Country Store can be approved with conditions for retail and food establishment and tobacco, with conditions.
Okay. Brian, do you have any questions about this application?
We've got serve safe and everything squared away. I'm just looking through here. For the guy, what's his name? Who's going to be there every day at the country store?
Looks like we need the certified food manager, menu,
Yeah,
and
that-
allergy.
Yep, that'll be contingent upon getting that.
For David Smith, yeah.
David Smith, yes.
That's and that one's for.
Will you underscore the importance of tobacco and sales to minor to the manager and tell them that, you know, we take it very seriously and we do have consequences that are pretty severe if a store is to be selling to a minor.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, shall we do two motions for these, or one for the whole thing?
Let's
Or is it
say,
two separate permits? I
yes, do them separately, so 3 and 4.
guess? Okay. So move to approve the 2017 seasonal food service permit for Bob's Seafood Cafe. Let's see, we're not doing the retail and the tobacco right now, so. With the condition that the food manager certificates, menu, and allergy awareness are all turned in, and the inspection has been done at that location, right? At Bob's Seafood, so we're all set on that one?
Yep.
Okay.
That has the applications, the certificates. Okay, and then the country store? So I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. Okay, and then number 3?
Move to approve the 2017 seasonal food service permit for the country store at 259 Shore Drive. And also the food establishment and tobacco sales permits, with the condition that the certified food manager certificates, the menu and allergy awareness certificates be presented prior to operation, and that a final satisfactory inspection be performed by an agent of the Board of Health prior to operation.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay. So number 5 is going to be continued to the next meeting. 6, the Title V variance for 35 Slice Way. And Glenn will get us started.
Okay, the owner and representative are here. A septic inspection discovered the fact that the swimming pool at the property that was installed in 2004 was installed 6 feet away from the existing septic tank. The leaching facility is assumed to be about 19 feet away, but there is no way to confirm that in the field due to the depth of the leaching facility. I requested the owner to request a variance due to the setback violation, because it's supposed to be 10 feet from the septic tank to the swimming pool. I checked the Title V, and the Board of Health does not have any recourse against the pool company for violating the setback, because they were the ones who installed the pool. And they presented a plan that showed 11.5 feet from the septic tank to the proposed pool, but when it was actually installed, it was installed only 6 feet away. So it is the owner's responsibility when it comes to the septic system. So at this point, there is a Title V variance request proposed to the board. And I think that any type of mitigation, installing a rubber membrane is the standard mitigation for this, but I think because of the distance, I think there's gonna be more damage done than actual good at this point. So, I was recommending just approval of the variance.
So it's just the variance that's requested to allow the existing swimming pool to be less than 10
Yeah.
feet to the existing SAS
That's correct, septic tank,
septic tank.
yep.
Brian, do you have any questions?
No?
Okay. Do you want to?
Move to approve the variance request for 35 Slice Way to allow for the septic tank to be less than 10 feet from the pool.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Expecting a big crowd.
You are our big crowd. Yeah. I'm sorry about your husband.
Oh, thank you.
Have a good night.
Do you need a check or
Nope.
anything?
nope, I'm gonna write something up and you'll get it and it'll be in the file, so when the property is sold, it'll be clear.
23rd, I think.
You'll have it by then.
Very
Thanks
good.
a lot.
Good night, girls.
Thank you.
Okay. Number 7, the request for the 2017 retail food permit, variance to the food code, my 11 Commercial Street, Roach Brothers. This was an extremely long hassle plan to get the pH of rice below 5.
Yeah.
It was fascinating, though. I was like very interested. And this is one of the things that I do like about being on this board is, you know, what I didn't know before I started, I had no idea. And I've learned so much by being on this board. Now I know how to get the pH of rice, potentially hazardous foods of below 5. So it is fascinating and relatively decent reading, so. Do you want to outline this, Glenn?
The applicant is now the contracted sushi preparers for all of the Roach Brothers establishments. Their corporation is out of Philadelphia, but the regional manager, Martin Ho, is from Quincy. The changeover of the companies occurred on Sunday, May 28th. I did a pre-operation inspection on Friday before the long weekend, which was performed with a follow-up on Tuesday after the long weekend to confirm the knowledge of the chef regarding the rice acidification process. In order to render the rice not a potentially hazardous food, vinegar is used to reduce the pH to less than 4.6. The required HACCP plan outlines the acidification process and record keeping, which was reviewed, and it meets the requirements per the food code. The HACCP plan was followed during the on-site rice acidification process, which includes calibration, storage, holding times, and record keeping. The assistant health agent was impressed with the knowledge of the chef. So at this point, I recommend approval of the 2017 retail and food establishment and the food code variance.
Brian, any inquiries, questions?
No,
queries?
no, it's just good to hear that he did it right in front of.
Yeah, it was
that's
quite a
good.
process, and I told them to make sure that they could go through everything.
Yeah,
And Ronnie thought it was very well done.
oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I've seen it not so great before.
Yeah.
No, no questions or anything, so. Move to approve the request for the 2017 retail and food establishment permit and the food code variance to the Federal Food Code, Section 3-502.11 and 8-103.11.
Easy for you to say. I second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So moved, okay. Manufactured home regulation to review the proposed amendment. BTW, is the Epic Bridges coming at 7:15, or is that something that,
I thought that the applicant was gonna come, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
I guess maybe we can just truck along until they show up, and then we can
Okay.
see how it works. So we can just dig right into this manufactured home regulation, and if they come, then we can deal with it. Do you have a copy of it, Brian?
Yep.
Okay. And we pretty much talked about this in the past, made recommendations for adjustments, and Glenn has given us his revised copy and would like to, I believe, bring in the 2 manufactured home parks and have a hearing,
Yeah,
a public hearing.
yeah, I think we're at a point where we need to have a hearing, and I'd actually love to get some feedback on a couple parts of it from the park operators, just regarding like the types of bill of sales that could be provided. I don't know all the ins and outs on the actual transfer, if a bill of sale is the only thing that's used, just so that it's written in properly. So, but I think we're at that time. Because there's really only 3 parts that are being revised.
Is that something that could be scanned and emailed?
Absolutely.
Okay. So keep it paperless as much as possible.
Yeah, there might be instances, I suppose, where there might be a mortgage on, I mean, they can be a little bit pricey for people to pay for them up front. So I guess that might be another alternative to just having the bill of sale, something recorded at deeds would be,
There's nothing that's recorded at the registry of deeds.
not even for the mortgages that they
No,
might hold for
that's-
those things? They'd
That's
be-
why part of the,
Oh, okay.
part of the amendment is to get the owners, the names, the addresses, their email addresses, as much information as possible, because tracking them is nearly impossible, because even on the bill of sales, their addresses aren't put on there, just their names and basically the amount that they're spending, but there's no other way to track them. You might get the town that they're from, but again, that may not help you.
Interesting way to live below the radar.
Absolutely. And it makes enforcement very difficult when you get down to the owner level below the park operator. And park
Right.
operators don't seem to keep very good track.
Pardon my ignorance, is there, I pay taxes to the town for my home. Is there a similar process for a manufactured home?
No. The operator of the park collects the taxes as part of the rent, and then the park operator pays the taxes to the town.
But that's just, is that for the land or also the structure?
That's for it's $12 per mobile home.
$12 per year?
No, per month.
Oh, per month. So the park operator is the tax collector?
Essentially for the park, and then that's forwarded to us and the tax collector. And those are considered use taxes, or an additional license fee. It's written a couple of different ways in the regulation.
Interesting.
So there is no property tax per se for the manufactured home owner.
$144 a year? It's pretty cheap. Pretty affordable.
Yep.
Interesting. Is there anything that you wanted to add, amend, change, insert? Brian?
No, not at this time, no.
Okay.
So do you want us to vote on that, so that you can,
Just,
Offer a public
if you think
hearing,
it's
or-
ready to set up the public hearing, I'll do that.
if you can do it before the next meeting,
Yeah.
then
Okay.
get her done. Okay, so that we don't need to vote on that,
No.
and that will be
June 15th?
June 15th. Oh, my net is open. The zesty last agenda. Thanks, Glenn. Okay, so the request for the monitoring reduction, the 715, do you want to just go right ahead and deal with that, or do you want to wait until that maybe they show up? Because I don't really feel like I need much more information unless you feel like you do in order to move on it.
Data's data to me, so.
I don't, yeah, everything that I saw met the criteria, and I'm not 100% sure if they're gonna show, so why don't we take care of it?
Okay, I don't have any issue, going from monthly to quarterly seems reasonable to me. Do you want to, read your comments, or?
Sure.
Okay.
The contracted operator of the wastewater treatment unit at the bridges at Mashpee has requested a reduction of the required sampling. The reduction is requested according to Section 2.8 of the Wastewater System Operations Management and Compliance Agreement that was signed by the board and the Cape Cod Commission, which is recorded in the Registry of Deeds. Section 2.8 stipulates that after 18 months of operation, the monthly sampling may be reduced to quarterly if the effluent results meet the required concentrations as stipulated in Section 1.1. The averages were calculated over the 18-month period for BOD, TSS, total nitrogen, and oil and grease, and all concentrations meet the required discharge limits of Section 1.1. So I would request approval of the request to reduce the sampling from monthly to quarterly. I broke down the numbers and averages if you want to look at those.
Rather prefer to watch Brian struggle to see it on a screen. I already looked at this, but do you want to look at it? And
Oh, yeah, I got it. I was just
Thank you.
checking the dates, and it's actually performing really well.
Yeah, they gave it a 3-month warm-up period, and then after the 3 months, they said, then you can start taking the averages. And it has done very
Yeah.
well.
What's the daily flow on this? Is it over, it's not over 10,000, is it?
No.
Okay.
They have a limit of 4,050, and it has been over that for each month,
Oh, okay, okay.
or for each day, for daily flow, I should say. For, I think the highest I saw was 6,200 in one day, but again, it had zeros on either side of the day, which doesn't make any sense to me, but I think it's averaging like
Okay.
3,000, 3,500, somewhere in there.
per day,
Yeah,
not 34, but 35.
yeah, and it's allowed up to 4,050, and they did have 3 days where they did have to report to us where they had over the 4,050 for 3 consecutive days.
Oh, okay.
But even at those flows, it's still performing.
Yeah, it's
Pretty
doing
well.
well. Yeah, only one real.
Any reason why there was that spike?
I don't really consider it a spike. It was just 3 days of extra flows, because it has been higher than that.
Because that would be like double-ish.
Yeah, I don't fully understand the full flow at the bridges, but
Yeah.
it still seems to be performing.
Maybe they had an event or something like that.
Yeah, it's not doubling by any means, but
Yeah.
there are definitely some times where it gets more flow.
And having not seen the original approval on it, they have like a kitchen or something, and
Yeah.
obviously that's why there's oil and grease in there.
Yep.
It's a pretty nice design. They did a good job. They have that same wastewater treatment as Riverview School,
Yep.
right? That in-ground, is that the
Amphidrome.
amphidrome, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 3-stage, it's a tertiary treatment. Well, I shouldn't say tertiary, it has 3 stages to it, because tertiary treatment is disinfection, and it doesn't have disinfection, it just has a primary, a secondary, and then a polishing step, which is still biological, it's not considered a disinfection.
Yeah, I only had one high VOD day. That was it. Yeah. Sorry, I just.
Wastewater nerd.
This is what I talk, it's
Hey,
what I do every day.
it's your jam, that's why you're here.
Yeah. Ready for a motion? Okay. Move to approve the request for monitoring reduction for Epic Bridges at Mashpee to reduce it from monthly to quarterly sampling for the same parameters.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, discussion. 1, chronic sanitary code violations, 165 Ninigret Avenue.
Yeah, this is a problem child property for us.
I'm glad you printed out all these violations, because when you had it on the agenda before, I didn't understand the scope and the length of the issue. When you say chronic, it's indeed.
Well, I wrote them down, I actually went through more, and I haven't even gone through all of the complaints yet, so I still think that that list is gonna increase.
Do we need to call the owner in for a hearing?
Well, that's kinda where I'm headed.
Yeah, I think that's, when I saw how many there were and I read them,
Yeah,
it's, I think imperative that the homeowner comes in for a discussion with the board
yeah.
as to their, I don't know that you could explain this away, but it's egregious. Did you want to eyeball the handwritten?
If you look at the list, that is the condition at 418.
Yeah.
And we got several calls on that. We got 4 calls on that when it came to that.
The bull rake is, it's a hazard waiting to happen regardless of but the trash in of itself.
And then these 2 are just from a couple days ago.
And then the rats.
Yeah, yeah.
Unacceptable.
I wish I had more pictures. We didn't take pictures along the line, but we do have the notes from all of the inspections. And,
I'm also super concerned that in all the photographs, there's always some child's toy that is in the picture, whether it's a bike or one of those little scooter things, and with rats and
yeah,
debris flying around and trash, just from, health.
yeah. But besides the nuisance from the trash that they're just leaving outside, I have concerns and mentions from other complainants about the septic overflowing. And also, I've been to the property, and I know that from the police raid that was done back in December of 2014, the doors were smashed in, and neither of the doors have been replaced since then. So we're going on 3 years now where the doors, they can be closed and locked, but they're in such bad shape that they can fall apart, basically.
So is there breakout at the surface of the septic?
I don't know that. See, we can't get into the backyard without permission from the neighbors, and we haven't been able to get close enough to see that, but I think we need to require a septic inspection to be done.
I think the other part that, besides the children's toys, that I find troublesome is that a lot of these complaints are anonymous, which makes me feel that there's a certain emotional fear around reporting of this property.
Yeah,
So some people gave their names and other people remained anonymous, which I completely understand. But that says a lot to me,
yeah.
So there's the documentation and then there's the unspoken concerns of all these
Yeah, the
Toys
property's now
rats.
in foreclosure, so the owner really doesn't have any incentive to take care of the property, because the bank is gonna take it.
It's a little bit like my property that I bought when I found all that household trash buried.
Yeah.
Over 40 bags of household trash.
There's your rake.
Yeah, so it's, child falls on that, they're gonna get impaled. Tetanus and, so, I don't know if it's at all of interest to the board, but I was I'm on the executive committee of the Cape Cod Hoarding Task Force, and we had a meeting today, and when the presenter was talking about his area of interest, and I saw the agenda, and the agenda resonated with me. This guy, Alan Hope, spoke about receivership. And so I brought these 2 resources for the board and for the department to keep in your records. And it's a very interesting process. At this particular meeting, Brewster Health Department was represented, and they had a hoarder who was very problematic with trash, et cetera, and vermin, and that property was, went into receivership and was managed by the receiver. All the money to deal with the property and the management and, you know, driving to the store to pay the utility bills and everything is all done through the receiver. So the town, the municipality doesn't have to pay for any of the management of the situation. So whether it's hoarding or some other issue where there's a foreclosure or a condemnation or whatnot, and this Ninnegrit Avenue property, Ninnegrit Road made me think about this, and it kind of was an interesting dovetail. So receivership is a little complicated, but I think if you are at all familiar with the process, it might be something that would be useful with this property.
Yep, it definitely is a process.
Yeah, so Brewster, it took about 6 months to implement, and the person, Alan Hope, who presented today, said it could be, you know, several years.
Yeah.
2 years is the longest he's been through, and he's dealt with foreclosed, like, rooming houses where there was like 60, 70 residents that had to be dealt with hoarding and all different kinds of addictions.
Yeah.
And then also other mental illnesses, and, you know, this issue. So, super interesting, just a resource. So, I don't know who's interested in looking at it, but I think it might be a viable resource for properties like this where there's just, you know, you look at this stack of complaints and the resources that the tax base in this town has to pay for to deal with and respond to all these complaints is just monumental. Like, you know, you look at sort of regular Johnny homeowner and, you know, they send their kids to school and eventually they might, you know, use the senior center, but hopefully they don't need, you know, to have the police department deployed and the fire department deployed and the health department deployed
Right.
and really just be a sucking vortex of municipal resources. And that's kind of what this is.
Right.
You know, this is,
A lot of time there.
yeah, really, and what more could you be doing for the whole town as opposed to focusing in on this one, like, highly problematic property? So I don't really know what could be done, especially with foreclosure, but receivership might be an option for the town.
I'll look at that. I have not, where the bank is involved.
And lots of properties that go into receivership are bank-owned properties. That's not at all like an
Uncommon,
issue.
yeah.
It's not uncommon at all. It's actually really common, and banks are very familiar with it. And some banks seem to be better than others. That's what Mr. Hope said. He also said that you could call him and talk with him.
Because of the time it takes, we don't usually go that way, but we have had properties that have sat for years.
Yeah.
So it might be something for us to look at.
The Deer Crossing took a valuable, an enormous amount of resources for the town. Never mind,
Yeah,
you know, cash money from the town to, or, you know, other properties. So I'm not advocating for this one particular company. There seems to be quite a few. I just happened to be in a meeting today where this person spoke. I had never heard of that as an option to deal with
Yeah.
issues of such, you know, like hoarding or, you know, yards filled with garbage and vermin and, you know, police action and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
yeah. There are a couple instances where I've heard this being used. And one of them, I think, was that the attorney actually that got hired by the court on that Brewster one that you're talking about came and spoke at the Cape Cod Hoarding Task Force meeting on one that I went to. And it was very, very informative.
Yeah.
And
Brewster's Health said they could not have been more satisfied with the process.
Right.
Once the property was in receivership, the health agent, the fire department, the police department, they didn't have to deal with it anymore.
Right.
So the town was free to go on with the daily business of maintaining the town,
Right.
not focusing on,
on chasing people to get things done.
yeah. And I was thinking about you driving to Hyannis to go pay a utility bill.
Right.
You know, like,
Yep,
it's a ridiculous waste of your resource, your abilities
sure,
are lost in that, that was just,
yep.
so, I don't know what you want to add to this discussion, Brian.
It sounds like an interesting avenue. I'm interested, yeah. I don't really know much about receivership myself, so now I'm gonna educate myself on that.
In Greenfield, there are a couple of health agents several years ago used it to clean up blighted properties,
Yeah.
abandoned buildings in the commercial area of Greenfield.
Yeah,
And so they basically went after the owners, where the owners were defunct, and took through the courts and got receivership. And so the courts ordered and used their money to repair the properties, either tear down buildings and bring the properties back to a natural state. And so the properties could either be redeveloped
Yep.
or left in a natural state where they were no longer a hazard. They were being used for, their abandoned buildings were being used for drugs and vagrants and everything else that go along with abandoned buildings. And so they really cleaned up a good portion of one of the lesser sections of Greenfield. And they won awards for it. They really did a great job using that.
Book hoarding. This is this could be trash hoarding that's happening on Nunegret Ave. Trash hoarding, I didn't even know that was really larder hoarding, recycling hoarding, animal hoarding. And this receivership company deals with all of those and more, like there's so many different kinds of issues that they deal with. And again, this is one of many, many companies that offer this service.
Yeah,
So, I did not know that was a tool in our toolbox, but I think we might consider it. We've had these issues and extremely problematic ones like this particular address where there's vermin,
Yeah.
children, potential breakout of the septic system. And who wants to live next to that? Never mind, people who you can't even feel like can give your name to complain,
yeah,
like you're that afraid of them, I guess, to be fair.
right,
Like that's a problem. I wouldn't want to live near that.
right.
That's,
it brings down property values for everyone too, so.
yeah, well, if you're trying to raise a family or you're trying to live out your golden years,
Right.
you have to deal with Title V breakout, vermin,
Yeah.
Worrisome neighbors. I don't know. But I believe I don't know, like, if now you say that the property is in foreclosure, if the property owner really has even any vested interest in maintaining.
Well, I think that's something that we need to find out. And certainly if we do the inspections and find the violations, which will be basis for possible condemnation at this point, then they'll have to come to the plate and see if they want the property. If not, then maybe go the receivership route
Yeah.
and deal with the bank to get it cleaned up.
I think this area of town can be especially problematic, and if we have an abandoned house that's trashy,
Yeah,
it's gonna become a larger problem that the town is gonna have to devote much more resources to if we don't get on the stick about this. So I think that being, well, it's hard to say proactive because of all of these years have gone by, and I'm not at all, criticizing the health department. It's a many year issue, but I think looking now at with a possible foreclosure in that neighborhood.
yeah,
I don't know if you guys have ever been on Spalliver, the Massachusetts State Police GIS data layer maps.
oh, no,
And so kind of like regular GIS, you can look for hardwood forests or, impermeable surfaces, but this shows data layer maps of crimes.
oh,
So you can look at stabbings, rapes, murder, police, how many times the police have been to properties.
yeah,
And, you map that area and
yeah.
there's a lot going on.
This one will come up.
Yeah, well, not just this particular one, but
Right.
that,
Yeah.
that section of 151. So I think it's best to keep on this.
Okay.
Good luck.
Spolliver? Is that linked through Oliver, or is it?
Mass State Police,
Okay.
you know, it's an interesting, you can do, of course, multiple ones, so you could say, well, I want to find out whether there was stabbings, murders, and rapes, you know, or, you know, so kind of like the GIS data layer maps, you can mix it up and say, you know, I want to find zone 2 impermeable surfaces and hardwood forests or something. It's the same sort of play
You
on
want me
that.
to go ahead with these inspections for this?
Yes.
Okay.
I assume you have to have a fairly egregious situation for an administrative search warrant of a break, like you can't do that.
And any refusal is basis for a search warrant. Would you mind putting that in a motion for the inspections?
Maybe just give us some language, so they would allow you to do what you need to do.
Oh, I didn't print this out for you. Let me see.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to require a septic inspection to be performed by the owner or an agent of the Board of Health, and to also require a sanitary code inspection of the interior. If violations are found, schedule a condemnation hearing for June 15th.
Is that based on the amount of
It'll be
complaints
based on the violations, yeah.
that we're requiring a sanitary code inspection?
Yep.
Okay, I second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Discussion item 2, the use of irrigation wells in PFC.
I don't have everything
contaminant
prepared
areas.
for that. I'm gonna have to attempt that at a later date.
Okay, so maybe the notorious June 15th
Maybe.
agenda?
We may have another member by that time.
I saw the agenda, how exciting. Yeah, I was all, you know, just to get back to this, I was looking at phytoforensics. I don't know if you ever have read about phytoforensics. Super interesting. It's part of like, it's a subsection of phyto screening. So for, you know, VOCs and other contaminants of emerging concern
Oh,
with uptake systemically from plants.
yeah?
I was reading all these different PhD dissertations on phytoforensics. Super interesting topic, especially if you like hazardous waste.
So the plants are being used to clean, or they are being used as an indicator?
Both,
Okay.
yeah, both. So core sampling of trees and other plants to look at subsurface groundwater contamination, but then also the volatilization of those VOCs from the trees and the trunks.
Oh.
But then also other herbaceous plants, not woody plants like trees,
Yeah.
but like herbaceous plants like grass and stuff like that, with PFAS and PFOS and other, I know you trash nerds might appreciate the,
Yeah, I suppose
Yeah.
that if
if you needed
if
help.
there's a good correlation between tree uptake of those things and groundwater, then that, I mean, it's a less expensive way of monitoring than doing a bunch of wells all over the place, so.
Well, I was just thinking of irrigation wells also, like if you were to use it, like we were kind of talking about over at Lakeside, you know, using water that was contaminated. I mean, obviously now they have
Right.
granulated carbon filters, but, you know, if you were to water your tomato plants, what does that look like if you tested the tomato?
Right.
I mean, I'm not in phytoforensics, so I don't know, but it's an interesting query.
Yeah, the PFCs, that's part of my argument that I was gonna make for the irrigation wells is that most, or all of the properties that are now being identified with PFCs are being tied into town water, if they have private wells. So the main concern with the PFCs is ingestion. And the EPA health advisories that's issued is based on ingestion over a period of a lifetime. 70 years is the basis that they're using. So if the irrigation wells can the irrigation wells still be used now that the primary concern of the drinking water has been taken care of?
Except for, and I hate to say this publicly, but the EPA doesn't know what they're talking about when it comes to PFAS and the rest of those, because they're persistent compounds with high, strong bonds that break down in geologic time, and they do volatilize. So there is some, and they're repel, there are just so many components of it that the EPA doesn't understand. So I can say comprehensively that they might understand more about it in drinking water, but they themselves say when it comes to other ways to be exposed, they just don't know right now.
Right. Well, we're a regulatory board, though, and we go by what we're given from the scientific community. So,
I think being overly cautious is reasonable, though.
Yeah.
And, you say data is data, and you believe in data, and I do too. But,
well, that
spraying of
begs the
DDT
question.
was data.
That
They
begs
said
the
it worked.
question that, as the Board of Health, do we treat the areas with PFCs as the moratorium? And should we be shutting down all of the irrigation wells? Because right now, we're not doing that.
I think it's an interesting question.
And so that was my discussion. But I was hoping to have something prepared and sent off to DEP and DPH and get everybody's read on it before I bring it to you, and I just haven't gotten that far with it yet. But I think that there's discussion that needs to be made. If the consensus is we're gonna be conservative but then we need to notify everybody that we're gonna be turning off their irrigation wells.
That, or, do we throw up our hands and say, these chemicals are ubiquitous and universal, and polar bears have them, and everything has them. It's in breast milk. It's in everything.
Right, the
And
other,
everyone has these compounds in their bodies, and is the irrigation well going to make a iota of difference?
are they any worse than the gasoline contaminants that you're swimming in the ponds? Because the gasoline contaminants, the benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene, and the MTBE, which is leached into the groundwater from the boats, you're swimming in every time you go in the ponds, and you're ingesting a portion of it, and it's there. Is it any worse than that? But the other side of the PFCs and the irrigation wells is, if we're liberal in its application, and we say that the irrigation wells can be used, but those properties that have irrigation wells have the owners sign and put on record that they've been made aware that it's there. And that's something that this board years ago actually did in the Briarwood section of town when the contamination was first found coming from the base. There was no town water at that time. And so, or at least in the Briarwood section, and that's when the Briarwood section was actually being constructed in the early to mid 80s. And so there were people that had building permits that were building their homes, and they were ready to move into their homes, and they had well water for their source of water. And so what I believe through town council, they came up with a document that the homeowners would sign to say that the town would allow them to move in, occupy their homes, use the well water until town water was made available. And I think that's something that we could do, because on the irrigation well and the PFCs is, we've put people on notice. We've told them that it's there. We can guide them and let them know how to utilize it and not to consume it, and have them sign something to say, look, we've been made aware, but we would still like to use and keep our irrigation well. So there's a liability certainly that the town has, and we would deal with council to see if that is something that is a viable option.
Could we make a recommendation, like use this on your ornamentals and your grass, but perhaps
And not so much for the garden, absolutely,
you know,
because of the uptake, and we're still learning the science based on that.
Yeah,
So I think those are the two sides of the coin, and the decision that needs to be made, and made relatively soon, because if we should be turning these irrigation wells off, I need to start identifying them and notifying people.
Right. I guess I would be almost more concerned about aspiration via, lawn sprinklers. You're inhaling that, I don't know what the research is behind that.
Right. Yeah,
very
right,
small.
right
Very
now,
small.
the only hazard that's been identified is ingestion.
Ingestion, okay. So it's not able to.
And right now, this board has denied
so,
or I should say, has approved irrigation wells, but has put such onerous conditions on it as far as sampling for the PFCs, when we know that there's a good chance that they're gonna be there and be above the health advisory. And so the one property that we've looked at on Hoopole Road, it was, the owner has to decide, do I put the well in and then have to spend $1,000 a year on testing? So, that's all I wanted to get to the board, because I think it's worthy of a discussion.
absolutely. So we'll put this on in July.
Yeah.
Bert's old tickler filed.
July would be good.
You don't have to hear me moaning on about phytoforensics. Anything else?
We'd love to have the information from that, though,
Well,
especially if it involves PFCs.
I went to that Silent Spring update at Barnstable Town Hall last week, and I wasn't able to stay for the whole thing, unfortunately, but it was very interesting. Their new avenue of study, and then at the, of research, rather, and then at the Health Agents Coalition meeting, the last meeting, there was a person from, I think, BU, who has been studying water on the Cape and children, and
In Barnstable.
yeah,
Right.
but part of Mashpee too, because Mashpee had those pipes installed. And so it's coming at us from all angles, underground, above ground, and, the EPA is still in the process of looking at it, and, we don't know what their research funding is going to be going forward on these things, because of budget considerations. So I think it's important to be overly cautious, because in the past, we have seen the science demonstrate that something is non-toxic or toxic, and we've gone ahead and with that information, and then we found later on that it was in fact quite the opposite. P.S. Eggs are now bad for you or good for you, right? I don't know. Red wine, chocolate, who knows? Coffee, but never mind all these persistent chemicals that break down in geologic time. On that note, are we done?
I have nothing further.
Really? Brian, do you?
Nothing. Move to adjourn at 7:54 PM.
I second that. All in favor?
Aye.